Course 3, Lesson 98 is going to talk about what we call relations and functions. They're slightly different concepts. A relation is a little easier to find in the world. They aren't too uncommon. It just means two numbers paired together, right? Could be something as simple as the first player on a basketball team, let's say Kobe Bryant, is number 24. So we graph first is paired with 24, right? First player is X, 24 is Y, okay? There's no real reason for those two numbers to be paired together. It's just the way it is, because then the second player listed could be number 12. Be about there. Second player, 12. And if you graph the third player, maybe he's 13. All right, well, that's kind of busting our plan here. Maybe the fourth player is like 10. So I'll go like there. Okay, so we don't really have much of a pattern here. You can't necessarily know that because this is true, we know what this is going to be. It doesn't follow that. It's just a relation. It's just a pairing of numbers. And when you graph something like this, one thing that might end up happening is you could end up with something that turns back on itself. And what we call a vertical line test means if I draw a vertical line through here, it's going to hit at least twice. It hit once here, it's going to hit again down here. And if that ever happens, it's a relation, not a function. A true function is linear, so it will only touch once. Or even if it curves a little bit, if you draw a vertical line through this, it can only touch once to be called a function. Now, a function follows a little more of a pattern. We've kind of learned about these, right? For example, purchase price to number of tickets. Of course, 0 matches with 0. But if you purchase 1, it costs $7. Purchase 2, it stays on the pattern. Times 2 times 2. Sorry, not times 2, times 7. So your price is always 7 times, because it costs $7, the number of tickets you buy. All right? So 0 matches with 0, 1 matches with 7, 2 matches with 14, and so on. This is called a function. Here in example 1, they ask 3 relations. Are any even more than a relation? Is it a function? Meaning, use your vertical line test. In letter A, if I draw a straight line down, will it ever hit the line graphed more than once? No. It only hits once here, and once here, and once here. So this one's good. How about B? It could be more, because it says these. It looks different. It's not very linear, but no matter what, I will only hit a point once. This starts to get really close, but it doesn't look like it's ever going to completely turn back at all. It doesn't do that. It's always technically going a little further to the left or to the right. So this one's good. Now what about C? You can tell, for goodness sake, the y-axis itself is a vertical line. It's already going right through it. So you can tell right off the bat, C is not. It's just a relation. It's not a function. That could be graphing any number of pairs of numbers. Who knows what? All right. So that one's pretty basic. Example 2, sketch a circle. If we were to sketch a circle with its center on the origin, so you take your protractor right on the origin and you pull it to reach to 5. Then you turn that around, it'll hit 5 on all axes. Your pairs are going to be 0, positive 5. That's this one. Yeah, 0, positive 5. This one is 5, 0. 5 over, 0 down. So that's 5, 0. Then we go x is 0, y is negative 5. That's this one. And then the last one is back 5. So negative 5, but up 0. That's this one. All right, we can see that this is not a function. It's just a relation with two things. First of all, with functions, we've learned you should never put in 0. And getting 5 is fine, but the problem is we put in 0 here and we get negative 5. A function needs to be predictable in that the input can only yield one possible output. And here we have 0 connecting to 2. It can't do that. The other rule, right, if you haven't figured this out, maybe you caught it, try any vertical line through one point, it's going to go through twice, right? Because look at it hit here and it hit here. So the vertical line test says relation, not a function. Not a function. Wrapping up, correlations mean, okay, you have a scatter of points, like in my basketball example, and it's not a perfect function, but we can create some sort of a predictability out of it. We can make predictions because it's generally following this cluster of lines, maybe. And by doing that, maybe I'd be able to predict, you know, what number, this was 4, so what number 5 would be. I might get close by using what's called a trend line. For a scatter of points that seems to cluster around a certain point called a correlation, I can try to get close and say the 5th player would maybe be right here. Maybe the 5th player would be 6. Actually, that looks more like 4, doesn't it? On my messy graph. We don't know that, but we're making a prediction based on generally, you know, they seem to be going down. Not always, but they are generally. They show this with this particular example. We're talking about like when they arrive to school and how many students are there. It's not a perfect function, but if they were to ask at 10 minutes before school, how many kids would be there? Well, on some days it was 20, some days it was 25. So we drew a trend line through this correlation. As you can see, generally, the later we are in, the earlier we are, minutes before school. So the more minutes before school, the less kids that are there. They drew this trend line, and the trend line is going to fall at about 23, the average between the points. So 23. And if you use that trend line, you can also guess at 8. Okay? At 8 minutes, looks like we have no points to average here, but because thanks to the trend line, we can go, oh, this looks like it goes right about at 33. In a problem like this, you might ask, how do I get the exact right answer? What if I drew my trend line just a little bit sloped the wrong way? It's about getting close, okay? If I'm correcting, I'm going to give it to you, with some leeway of maybe 2 or 3 points. Okay, you can do A and B real quick. And then it looks like C and D want you to use the table to decide if it's a function. And that, I'm going to have you do both of those too. To determine if it's just a relation or if it's also a function, remember we're using the test, do we have 2 being the same thing? Or is it 0 is only ever 0, the in is only ever 7? This was like, especially when we did this one, the points of a circle. If you see on a table the input, or x, like 0, matches with more than one possible output. We have 0 here, but 0 is also being a negative 5, see? near zeros again. So if you see 0 repeated, this has to still be the same thing. And in this case, it's not. So it's just a relation, not a function. So do practice, all 4 practice.